The stranger who looked exactly like me knocked at my door. The night was quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your ears and makes every small sound feel louder than it should. I was half asleep on the couch when the knock came, sharp and deliberate, echoing through the stillness of the house. At first, I thought I had imagined it, some trick of a restless mind. But then it came again, louder this time, steady and insistent. My heart began to pound as I rose slowly, every step toward the door heavy with unease. Something about the timing, the hour, felt wrong. No one should be knocking at my door this late. I reached for the handle, my hand trembling slightly, and pulled the door open. What I saw on the other side made my breath catch in my throat. Standing there was someone who looked exactly like me. Same face, same eyes, same nervous expression. For a moment, I thought I was staring into a mirror, but the reflection was breathing, shifting, alive. My mind scrambled for explanations. Was this a trick, a dream, some cruel prank? But the figure in front of me wasn't laughing. They looked terrified. The stranger's eyes darted around as if they expected someone to be watching. Their lips trembled as they tried to speak, but no words came out at first. I stood frozen, unable to move, unable to process what I was seeing. Every instinct screamed at me to slam the door shut, to lock it and pretend this wasn't happening. But curiosity held me in place. I needed to know who, or what, this person was. Finally, they spoke, and the sound of their voice made my skin crawl. It wasn't just similar, it was identical to mine. The same tone, the same rhythm, as if I were listening to myself speak from outside my own body. "Please," they whispered, their voice cracking. "I don't have much time." The words sent a chill down my spine. Whoever they weren't here by accident. I stepped back slightly, my mind racing. Could this be a twin I never knew about? A long-lost sibling hidden from me all my life? Or was it something darker, something that couldn't be explained by blood or family? The stranger's eyes locked onto mine, and in them I saw desperation, fear, and something else. Something that felt like recognition. It was as if they knew me, not just my face, but everything about me. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. I wanted to ask 100 questions, but my throat felt tight, my words stuck somewhere deep inside. The stranger shifted nervously, glancing over their shoulder into the darkness beyond the porch. "They'll find me if I stay here too long," they said, their voice trembling. But I had to come. You're the only one who can help me. My pulse quickened, my thoughts spinning out of control. Who were they? Why did this person look exactly like me? And why did they believe I could help them? The questions piled up, but the answers felt impossibly far away. All I knew was that the night had shifted, the world had tilted, and nothing would ever feel normal again. I tried to steady my voice as I finally managed to speak. "Who are you?" I asked, though the words sounded weak, almost swallowed by the night. The stranger's lips curved into a faint, broken smile, as if they had been waiting for me to ask. But instead of answering, they stepped closer, their presence overwhelming, their eyes filled with urgency. The air between us felt charged, heavy with something I couldn't name. My instincts screamed at me to run, to shut the door and lock it tight, but another part of me leaned forward, drawn to the mystery, to the impossible truth standing right in front of me. The stranger's breath was uneven, their hands trembling as they reached out slightly, as though they wanted to touch me but didn't dare. Then, in a voice that was my own, trembling but certain, they spoke the words that froze me in place, words that would echo in my mind long after the night was over. "I need your help. Before it's too late." I stepped aside almost without thinking, my body moving before my mind could catch up. The stranger brushed past me into the dimly lit hallway, and for a moment it felt like I was watching myself walk into my own home. Every movement, every nervous glance over the shoulder, it was like a reflection had come to life. I closed the door slowly, my heart hammering in my chest, and turned to face them. The silence between us was unbearable, filled with questions I couldn't yet form into words. They stood in the middle of the room, their eyes darting around as if memorizing every detail. Then their gaze landed on me, and I felt a strange chill. It wasn't just that they looked like me. It was the way they looked at me, as though they already knew me better than I knew myself. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could, they said my name. Not just my name, but the way I say it to myself when I'm alone, the way no one else ever has. I froze. My name on their lips sounded too familiar, too intimate. "How do you know that?" I asked, my voice shaking. They tilted their head, a faint smile flickering across their face. "I know more than that," they said softly. "I know the scar on your knee from when you fell off your bike at 7. I know the way you still can't sleep without checking the locks twice. I know the dream you keep having about the house with the red door." My stomach dropped. These weren't things a stranger could guess. These were pieces of me, private fragments no one else should know. I stumbled back a step, my hand gripping the edge of the table for balance. "Who are you?" I demanded, though my voice cracked halfway through. They didn't answer right away. Instead, they studied me with an intensity that made my skin crawl, as if they were searching for something in my face, some confirmation that I was real. The silence stretched, and I felt the weight of their knowledge pressing down on me. Finally, they spoke again, their voice low and steady. "I've been watching you for a long time," they said. "Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Everything you've lived, everything you've believed, it isn't the whole story. You've been living in a version of the truth, one carefully built for you." Their words sent a shiver through me. A version of the truth? What did that even mean? I tried to steady my breathing, but the room felt smaller, the air heavier. My thoughts raced, colliding with one another, none of them making sense. If this person wasn't lying, if they really knew these things about me, then the life I thought I understood was already unraveling. I wanted to push them out, to slam the door and pretend this never happened, but something in their eyes held me in place. They stepped closer, their movements cautious, almost fragile. "I know this is hard to believe," they said, their voice trembling now. "But I came here because you need to know the truth. You deserve to know what's been hidden from you." My pulse quickened, my body torn between fear and curiosity. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but another part of me leaned forward, desperate to hear what they had to say. I asked them again, more firmly this time, "What do you want from me?" Their expression softened, and for the first time I saw something in their eyes that wasn't fear or desperation. It was sorrow. They looked at me as though they pitied me, as though they knew something about my life that I didn't. The weight of that look made my chest tighten, my breath shallow. The silence stretched once more, and I could feel the tension building, the moment teetering on the edge of something I couldn't yet see. They finally leaned in, their voice barely above a whisper, but every word cut through me like a blade. "I'm not here to hurt you," they said, their eyes locked onto mine. "I'm here to warn you." And in that instant, I knew my life had just split in two. The life I thought I knew, and the one waiting to be revealed. The stranger sat down across from me, their hands trembling as they clasped together, their eyes darting around the room as if even the walls might be listening. I could feel the weight of their presence pressing against me, the uncanny resemblance making every word they spoke feel like it was coming from my own mouth. Finally, they leaned forward, their voice low and urgent. "Your family has been hiding something from you," they said. "Something they've kept buried for decades." The words hit me like a blow, and I felt my chest tighten as though the air had grown heavier. I tried to laugh, to dismiss it as nonsense, but the sound died in my throat when I saw the seriousness in their eyes. There was no trace of a joke, no hint of exaggeration. They meant every word. "You don't understand," they continued, their voice trembling. "The life you've been living, the stories you've been told, they're not the whole truth. They've been protecting you, but not in the way you think. They've been protecting themselves." My pulse quickened, and I felt the ground beneath me shift. I demanded to know what they meant, my voice sharper than I intended, but the stranger didn't flinch. Instead, they leaned closer, their expression filled with urgency. "There are things about your family you were never supposed to know," they whispered. "Things that could destroy everything if they ever came to light. And now those things are coming back. They're not gone. They're not forgotten, and you're in danger because of it." The words sent a chill crawling up my spine. I shook my head, refusing to believe it. My family wasn't perfect, but they weren't dangerous. They weren't liars. At least that's what I had always told myself. But the stranger's voice carried a conviction that made me doubt everything. "Why should I believe you?" I asked, my voice cracking. They looked at me with something like pity, their eyes softening. "Because I've lived in the shadow of their lies," they said, "and I've seen what happens when the truth tries to break free." The silence that followed was unbearable. My thoughts raced, colliding with one another, none of them making sense. If what they were saying was true, then my entire life had been built on a foundation of lies. Every memory, every story, every moment I thought I understood could be nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion. The thought made my stomach twist. The stranger's voice grew heavier, more urgent. "You think you know who you are," they said. "But you don't. You've been living in a version of the truth they created for you. They chose what you would know, what you would believe, and what you would never question. But the cracks are showing now. The past is clawing its way back, and if you don't face it, it will consume you." Their words echoed in my mind, each one cutting deeper than the last. I wanted to push them out, to slam the door and pretend this conversation had never happened. But something in their eyes held me in place. It wasn't just fear, it was desperation. They weren't here to play games. They were here because they believed I needed to hear this, no matter how much it hurt. And deep down, a part of me knew they were right. There had always been gaps in my family's story, questions that were brushed aside, silences that lingered too long. I asked them what exactly my family had been hiding, but they shook their head. "Not yet," they said. "If I tell you everything now, you won't believe me. You need to see it for yourself. You need to feel the truth before you can accept it." Their refusal only made the fear grow inside me, but it also made me realize something else. They weren't just here to confuse me. They were here to prepare me. The room felt colder, the shadows deeper, as I sat there staring at the person who looked exactly like me, listening to words that threatened to unravel everything I thought I knew. My heart pounded in my chest, my breath shallow, as the weight of their warning settled over me. This wasn't just about secrets. This was about survival. Finally, they leaned in closer, their voice dropping to a whisper that seemed to echo in the silence of the room. Their eyes locked onto mine, filled with a sorrow I couldn't understand, and they spoke the words that shattered the fragile world I had clung to. "They didn't tell you the truth about who you are." The stranger reached into their coat pocket with trembling hands, pulling out something wrapped in a piece of worn cloth. They placed it carefully on the table between us, as though it were fragile, as though it carried the weight of years. My breath caught as they unfolded the cloth to reveal an old photograph, its edges yellowed, its surface scratched with time. I leaned closer, my heart pounding, and the moment my eyes landed on the image, the world seemed to tilt beneath me. It was my parents. Younger, smiling, their arms wrapped around a child. At first, I felt a flicker of warmth, an old family photo, maybe one I had never seen before. But then my stomach twisted. The child in their arms looked exactly like me. Same eyes, same smile, same face. For a moment, I thought it was a trick of the light, or maybe my mind playing games. But the resemblance was undeniable. It was me. Or at least it looked like me. I reached for the photograph, my fingers brushing against the worn paper. The image felt heavier than it should, as though it carried more than just ink and memory. My parents looked so happy, so complete, as if this child had been their entire world. But something was wrong. Something I couldn't ignore. I turned the photo over, and that's when I saw it. The date written neatly on the back. My chest tightened. The year was years before I was born. My hands shook as I stared at the date, my mind racing. It didn't make sense. How could I be in a photograph that existed before I was alive? My throat went dry, and I looked up at the stranger, my voice barely a whisper. "What is this?" I asked. They didn't answer right away. Instead, they watched me with an expression that was both sorrowful and knowing, as though they had been waiting for this moment. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. I wanted to deny it, to tell myself it was a mistake, that the date was wrong, that the resemblance was just coincidence. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't a mistake. This was proof of something I couldn't yet understand. My parents had been hiding something that went beyond secrets and silence. This was a truth that rewrote everything I thought I knew about myself. The stranger finally spoke, their voice low and steady. "You see it, don't you?" they asked. "You see that it doesn't add up." I nodded slowly, unable to tear my eyes away from the photograph. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat louder than the last. The stranger leaned closer, their gaze locking onto mine. "That child in the photo? It isn't who you think it is." I shook my head, my voice breaking. "It looks like me. It has to be me." But even as I said the words, I knew they weren't true. The date on the back was undeniable. The photograph was undeniable. My parents had lived another life, one they had never told me about, one they had erased completely. And now, the proof of that life was staring back at me with my own face. The stranger's expression hardened, their eyes filled with something I couldn't quite name. Anger, sorrow, maybe both. "They never told you," they said. "They never wanted you to know. But you deserve the truth." Their words made my chest tighten, my breath shallow. The truth. A truth that had been buried for decades, hidden behind smiles and silence. I clutched the photograph tighter, my knuckles white, my mind spinning with questions I couldn't form. Who was this child? Why had my parents hidden them? And why did they look exactly like me? The stranger leaned back slightly, their voice trembling now, as though the weight of their own words was too much to bear. Finally, they looked me straight in the eye, their voice breaking as they spoke the words that shattered everything I thought I knew. "That child wasn't you. It was me." I couldn't sleep after seeing the photograph. The image of my parents holding a child who looked exactly like me, years before I was born, haunted every corner of my mind. Restless, I began searching through the house, desperate for answers. My hands shook as I pulled open drawers, rifled through boxes, and dug into places I had never thought to look before. That's when I found it, an old metal box hidden beneath loose floorboards in the attic. The lock was rusted, but it gave way with enough force. Inside, I found stacks of papers, yellowed with age, their edges curling. The first document I pulled out was a birth certificate. My breath caught as I read the name. It was mine. Or at least it looked like mine. But the date didn't match. It was years earlier than the one I had always known. My heart pounded as I flipped through the papers, finding another certificate, this one with the same last name, but a different first name. The details blurred together, but one thing was clear. There were two records, two beginnings, and only one of them was supposed to be me. I dug deeper, pulling out medical files. They were filled with notes, test results, and strange markings I didn't understand. Some pages had my name, others had the stranger's. The handwriting was my mother's, her careful script filling the margins with words like duplicate, replacement, and control. My stomach twisted as I realized these weren't just medical notes. They were records of something deliberate, something planned. The more I read, the colder I felt. There were receipts for hospital visits I had never been told about, bills for treatments that didn't match any illness I remembered having. One file even listed patient A and patient B, with details so eerily similar it was impossible to ignore. One of us had been documented as real, the other as something else. My hands trembled as I tried to make sense of it. I thought back to the stranger's words, their warning that my family had been hiding something for decades. Now, staring at the evidence, I realized they hadn't been lying. My parents had built two lives, two identities, and then erased one. But why? What could have driven them to such lengths? The silence of the attic pressed in on me, as though the walls themselves were holding back the answers. I pulled out a journal tucked at the bottom of the box, its cover cracked and worn. Inside were entries written in my father's hand. He wrote about choices, about sacrifices, about the unbearable weight of deciding who would stay and who would be forgotten. "We can't keep both," one entry read. "It will destroy us." My chest tightened as I realized what that meant. They had chosen, and I was the result of that choice. The stranger's face flashed in my mind, their eyes filled with sorrow and anger. They had told me I didn't know the truth about who I was. Now, with the documents spread before me, I understood what they meant. My identity wasn't just mine, it was shared, fractured, stolen. I wasn't the only one. There had always been another. I sat back, the papers scattered around me, my hands gripping my head as the weight of it all pressed down. My entire life, every memory, every story I had been told, was built on a foundation of lies. My parents hadn't just hidden a sibling. They had hidden the truth of who I was. And now that truth was staring me in the face, undeniable and merciless. The attic felt colder, the shadows deeper as I gathered the documents back into the box. My heart pounded, my breath shallow as the realization settled over me like a shroud. This wasn't just about secrets. This was about existence itself. One of us had been chosen, the other erased. One of us had lived the life meant for both. As I closed the box, my hands trembling, the final thought echoed in my mind, chilling and unshakable. One of us was never supposed to exist. The stranger's eyes burned with a mixture of sorrow and rage as they stared at me, their voice trembling but steady enough to cut through the silence. You don't understand what it feels like, they said, their words heavy with years of pain. To be erased. To be treated as though you never existed. While you, they paused, their jaw tightening. You were given everything that was supposed to be mine. My chest tightened, the weight of their accusation pressing down on me. I shook my head, trying to deny it. But the documents I had found, the photograph, the letters, all of it pointed to the truth I didn't want to face. My parents had built a life around someone else before me, and then somehow I had taken their place. That doesn't make sense, I whispered, though my voice cracked. Why would they do that? The stranger's lips curled into a bitter smile. Because they had to choose. And they didn't choose me. They began to pace the room, their movements restless, their hands clenching and unclenching as though they were holding back years of fury. I was there first, they said, their voice rising. I was the one they built everything for. The house, the plans, the future, it was all mine. But then something happened. Something they never told you. And suddenly I was gone, erased, forgotten. And you? They stopped, turning to face me, their eyes blazing. You became me. The words struck like a blade. My mind reeled, trying to piece together the fragments of truth. The hidden files, the duplicate records, the journal entries about impossible choices, it all fit together now in a way that made my stomach twist. My parents hadn't just hidden a sibling. They had replaced them. And I was the replacement. I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. The stranger stepped closer, their face inches from mine, and for a moment it was like staring into a mirror warped by grief. Do you know what it's like to watch your life being lived by someone else? They asked, their voice breaking. To see your parents smile at you but not at me? To know that every memory you have was supposed to be mine? I stumbled back, my hands trembling, my breath shallow. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, as though the truth itself was suffocating me. I wanted to deny it, to scream that it wasn't true, but deep down I knew it was. The evidence was undeniable. My life, my identity, everything I thought I knew. It had all been built on someone else's foundation. The stranger's voice softened, but the bitterness remained. They told you stories, didn't they? About where you came from, about who you are. But those stories were lies. They weren't protecting you. They were protecting themselves. They couldn't bear the guilt of what they had done. So they buried me and gave you my life instead. Their words echoed in my mind, each one heavier than the last. I thought of my parents, of the way they had always avoided certain questions, the silences that lingered too long. I had always assumed it was grief or pain they couldn't talk about. But now I realized it had been something else entirely. It had been guilt. They had chosen me, and in doing so, they had condemned the stranger to a life in the shadows. The silence between us grew unbearable, filled with the weight of truths I could no longer ignore. My heart pounded, my thoughts spun, and I felt the ground beneath me shift. Everything I had believed about myself, about my family, was unraveling thread by thread. And standing before me was the person who had paid the price for my existence. Finally, the stranger leaned closer, their voice low and trembling, but filled with a certainty that made my blood run cold. Their eyes locked onto mine, and they spoke the words that shattered the last fragile piece of denial I had left. They replaced me. With you. I searched the house again, driven by a restless energy that wouldn't let me stop. The photograph and the hidden files had already cracked the foundation of everything I believed, but I knew there had to be more. My instincts pulled me toward the old wooden chest in the basement, the one my parents had always kept locked. With shaking hands, I pried it open, and inside I found a bundle of envelopes tied together with a faded ribbon. The paper was yellowed, the ink smudged, but the handwriting was unmistakable. My parents. I sat on the cold floor, my heart pounding as I untied the ribbon. The first letter was written in my mother's delicate script. Her words were heavy with guilt, each line trembling with fear. She wrote about choices no parent should ever have to make, about debts owed and promises kept. We had no other way, she confessed. If we didn't agree, we would have lost everything. My chest tightened as I read, realizing these weren't just letters. They were confessions. The second letter was from my father, his handwriting sharp and deliberate. He spoke of a deal, one made in desperation, one that demanded a sacrifice. We were told only one could remain, he wrote. We chose the path that would keep us safe, even if it meant burying the truth. My hands trembled as I read the words, the weight of them pressing down on me. This wasn't just about survival, it was about betrayal. I flipped through more letters, each one darker than the last. My mother wrote about sleepless nights, haunted by the face of the child they had abandoned. My father wrote about the fear of discovery, the constant dread that the past would resurface. Together, their words painted a picture of a family torn apart by a decision they could never undo. They hadn't just hidden a sibling, they had made a deal to erase them. The letters revealed fragments of the arrangement, whispers of someone powerful, someone who demanded obedience. My parents had bargained with shadows, trading one life for another. We thought we could live with it, one letter read. We thought time would bury the guilt. But time has only sharpened it. My stomach twisted as I realized the truth. My very existence was the result of a bargain sealed in fear. I read on, my eyes burning, my breath shallow. My mother's words grew more desperate, her guilt spilling onto the page. "Every time I look at you, I see what we lost," she wrote. "I see the child we left behind. I pray you never learn the truth, because if you do, it will destroy you." The ink was smudged, as though her tears had stained the page. My hands shook as I held the letter, feeling the weight of her sorrow. The final letter was the most chilling. It was unsigned, but I knew it was from both of them. The words were blunt, stripped of emotion, as though they had been written in a moment of cold resolve. "We did what we had to do," it read. "We chose the child who could carry our name, and we buried the one who could not. No one must ever know. No one must ever speak of it again." I sat in silence, the letters spread around me like fragments of a broken mirror. Each word cut deeper, each confession unraveling the story I had been told my whole life. My parents hadn't just lied. They had made a choice, a deal, a sacrifice that had shaped everything. And now the truth was in my hands, undeniable and merciless. The stranger's face flashed in my mind, their voice trembling with anger as they told me I had been chosen to live their life. Now, with the letters before me, I knew they were right. My parents had erased them, sacrificed them, and given me the life that should have been theirs. The guilt, the fear, the silence. It all made sense now. As I gathered the letters back into the bundle, my hands trembling, the final words echoed in my mind, chilling and unshakable. They swore no one would ever know the truth. The stranger's voice was low, almost trembling as they began to speak. Their eyes never left mine, and it felt like they were peeling back the layers of my life with every word. "While you were growing up in this house, surrounded by warmth and love, I was out there," they said, pointing vaguely toward the darkness beyond the window. "I watched from the shadows, from alleys, from places you'd never think to look. I saw your birthdays, your laughter, the way they tucked you in at night. All the while, I stood outside, invisible, erased." Their words cut deep, and I felt a chill crawl up my spine. They leaned back, their hands trembling as they rubbed them together. "I wasn't supposed to survive," they continued. "They thought they had buried me for good. But I did survive, and I learned how to live in the cracks of the world where no one noticed me. I became a ghost, watching you live the life that was meant to be mine." Their eyes glistened with something between anger and sorrow. And I realized this wasn't just a story. It was a confession of years spent in exile. I tried to imagine it. A child growing up in the shadows, watching their own family from a distance. Never able to step inside. Never able to be acknowledged. The thought made my chest ache. "Why didn't you come back sooner?" I asked, my voice barely steady. The stranger's lips curled into a bitter smile. "Because I wasn't ready. Because I needed to know why. And because I needed to see if they would ever tell you the truth." "But they never did." Their voice grew sharper, filled with a quiet fury. "Do you know what it's like to see your parents smile at someone else with the love that should have been yours? To see them build a life around you while pretending I never existed? Every moment of your happiness was a reminder of my absence. Every laugh you shared with them was a knife in my chest." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, and I felt my throat tighten. They stood and began pacing, their movements restless, their energy raw. I told myself I would wait, that one day the truth would come out on its own. But years passed and nothing changed. You lived your life and I lived in the shadows, waiting for the moment I could step back into the story they tried to erase. Their voice cracked, and for the first time I saw the weight of their loneliness, the unbearable burden of being forgotten. I wanted to speak, to tell them I hadn't known, that I hadn't asked for this life any more than they had asked to lose it. But the words caught in my throat, because deep down I knew they were right. I had lived the life they were meant to have, and no amount of denial could change that. The guilt pressed down on me, heavy and unrelenting. The stranger stopped pacing and turned to me, their expression hardening. "I didn't come here to take it back," they said. "Not yet. I came here because you need to know the truth. Because the lies they told you are unraveling, and when they do, you'll need to decide who you really are. You'll need to decide if you're willing to face what they did to me. And to you." Their words sent a shiver through me, and I realized this wasn't just about the past. It was about what was coming. They stepped closer, their eyes burning with intensity. "I've been watching you all these years, but I wasn't the only one. There are others who know. Others who have been waiting, just like me. And they're not as patient. They don't want you to discover the truth. They want to bury it forever." My pulse quickened, the room suddenly feeling smaller, the shadows darker. I tried to steady my breathing, but the fear was already creeping in. If what they were saying was true, then the danger wasn't just from the past. It was here, now, closing in around me. My parents' lies hadn't just destroyed one life. They had created a storm that was still gathering strength, and I was standing in the center of it. The stranger's voice dropped to a whisper, their words chilling and final. Their eyes locked onto mine, filled with a certainty that made my blood run cold. "But someone else has been watching too." We left the house together, the photograph and letters still burning in my mind when I first felt it. That prickling sensation at the back of my neck, the one that tells you you're not alone. The street was quiet, the night air heavy, but there was a rhythm behind us, footsteps that matched our pace too perfectly. I glanced over my shoulder, and though the shadows swallowed most of the street, I caught the faintest flicker of movement. Someone was there, watching, following. The stranger noticed it too. Their body stiffened, their eyes narrowing as they scanned the darkness. "Don't look back again," they whispered, their voice sharp with urgency. If you do, they'll know we've seen them. My pulse quickened, my breath shallow as I forced myself to keep walking, every step heavier than the last. The silence of the night was broken only by the echo of footsteps that weren't ours. We turned down a side street, hoping to lose whoever was behind us, but the sound followed, steady and deliberate. The stranger grabbed my arm, pulling me into the shadows of a narrow alley. "This isn't random," they said, their voice trembling but certain. "They've been waiting for this moment. They don't want you to know the truth." Their words made my stomach twist. Whoever was following us wasn't just curious, they were dangerous. I tried to steady my voice as I asked who it could be, but the stranger shook their head. "It's connected to your parents," they said. "To the deal they made, the choice they buried. Someone else was part of it. Someone who made sure I disappeared. And now they're making sure you never learn why." The weight of their words pressed down on me, and suddenly the letters, the journals, the hidden files, they all felt like pieces of a puzzle someone was desperate to keep unsolved. The footsteps grew louder, closer until I could almost feel the presence behind us. My chest tightened, my body frozen between the urge to run and the need to know. The stranger's grip on my arm tightened, their eyes locked onto mine. "Listen to me," they said, their voice low and urgent. "This isn't just about me. It's about you too. If they catch us together, everything changes." I swallowed hard, my throat dry, as the shadows seemed to close in around us. The stranger's face was pale, their expression filled with a mix of fear and determination. "They erased me once," they whispered, "and they'll do it again if they have to. But this time they won't stop with me." Their words sent a chill crawling up my spine, and I realized the danger wasn't just theirs, it was mine too. The air grew colder, the silence heavier, as the footsteps stopped just beyond the mouth of the alley. Whoever was following us was close now, close enough to hear us breathe. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat louder than the last, as I realized we were trapped between the truth and the darkness that wanted to bury it. The stranger leaned closer, their voice barely audible, but every word cut through me like a blade. "You have to understand," they said. "This isn't just about the past. It's about survival. They don't care who gets hurt, as long as the truth stays buried." Their eyes burned with intensity, and I knew they weren't exaggerating. This was life or death. I wanted to ask what we should do, how we could escape, but the words caught in my throat. The stranger's gaze didn't waver, their grip on my arm unrelenting. "If they find us together," they whispered, their voice breaking with certainty, "only one of us will survive." And in that moment, I realized the truth wasn't just dangerous. It was deadly. I stormed into the living room, the bundle of letters clutched tightly in my hand, the photograph burning in my pocket like a brand. My parents sat together, startled by the suddenness of my entrance, but I didn't give them time to speak. I threw the papers onto the table, the words spilling out of me in a rush. "How long were you going to keep lying?" I demanded, my voice shaking with anger. "How long were you going to pretend there wasn't someone else? Someone who looks exactly like me?" The silence that followed was deafening, their faces pale, their eyes wide with fear. My father reached for the letters, his hand trembling, but I pulled them back before he could touch them. "Don't," I snapped. "Don't you dare try to hide them again. I know the truth now. I know about the child in the photograph. I know about the deal you made. I know you erased them." My mother's lips parted as though to speak, but no words came. Instead, tears welled in her eyes and she looked away, unable to meet my gaze. The weight of their silence was worse than any denial. It was confirmation. My father finally spoke, his voice low and strained. "You don't understand," he said. "We did what we had to do." His words made my chest tighten, my breath shallow. "What you had to do?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You abandoned a child. You erased them from our family. And you let me live their life as if nothing had happened." My mother buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. "We didn't want this," she whispered. "We never wanted it to be this way." Her words only fueled my anger. "Then why?" I demanded. "Why did you do it? Why did you choose me?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unrelenting, and for a long moment, neither of them answered. Finally, my father's composure cracked. His face twisted with guilt, his voice breaking as he spoke. "Because we were given no choice," he said. "Because someone forced our hand. We had to make a decision that no parent should ever have to make." His words trembled with desperation, but they did nothing to ease the fury burning inside me. "You had a choice," I said coldly. "And you chose to erase them." My mother lifted her head, her eyes red and swollen. "We thought we could protect you," she said. "We thought if we buried the truth deep enough, it would never come back to hurt you. But it was always there, haunting us, waiting for the day it would surface." Her voice cracked, and I could see the years of guilt etched into her face. But guilt wasn't enough. Not anymore. I slammed the photograph onto the table, the image of them smiling with the child staring back at us all. "You built a life around them first," I said, my voice trembling. "You loved them, and then you erased them. How could you do that? How could you pretend they never existed?" My father's eyes filled with tears, his hands shaking as he reached for the photo, but I pulled it back before he could touch it. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, until finally my father spoke again, his voice breaking under the weight of his own words. "We had to choose," he whispered, his eyes locked on mine. "And we chose you." The words hung in the air like a blade, cutting through the last fragile thread of denial I had left. My chest tightened, my breath caught, and I realized the truth was even worse than I had imagined. They hadn't just erased the stranger. They had chosen me instead. And that choice had destroyed everything. We had to choose. And we chose you. The room felt like it was closing in on me as the stranger's words began to unravel the last threads of denial I had been clinging to. My parents' silence, the hidden files, the letters filled with guilt. It all pointed to something darker than I had ever imagined. The stranger's eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time, I saw not just anger or sorrow, but a kind of grim certainty. "We're not twins," they said, their voice low and steady. "We were never meant to share the same story. One of us was created to replace the other." My breath caught in my throat, my mind spinning. "Created?" I whispered, the word tasting foreign and heavy on my tongue. The stranger nodded slowly, their expression hardening. "You were never supposed to exist the way you do. When I was erased, they couldn't live with the emptiness. They couldn't bear the guilt. So they made you. You weren't born to continue the story. You were born to rewrite it." The words struck like a blade, cutting through everything I thought I knew about myself. I stumbled back, my hands gripping the edge of the table for balance. The documents I had found flashed in my mind, the duplicate birth records, the medical files marked with patient A and patient B. I had thought they were mistakes, evidence of a cover-up. But now I realized they weren't mistakes at all. They were proof. Proof that I wasn't just chosen over the stranger. I was created to replace them. The stranger's voice grew heavier, trembling with the weight of years spent in silence. "They betrayed me," they said. "They chose to erase me, to bury me in the shadows. But they couldn't live with the hole they left behind. So they filled it. With you. You lived the life that was meant to be mine. Every smile, every memory, every moment. And all the while, I was out there, watching, waiting, knowing that one day, the truth would surface." I shook my head, my chest tightening, my breath shallow. "That's not possible," I whispered, though even as I said it, I knew it was. The evidence was undeniable. My parents' guilt, their silence, their desperate attempts to bury the past. It all made sense now. They hadn't just hidden a sibling. They had rewritten reality itself. The stranger stepped closer, their eyes burning with intensity. "You think you know who you are," they said, "but you don't. You're not who you believe. You're not who they told you. You're the version they chose to keep. And I'm the version they tried to erase." Their words echoed in my mind, each one heavier than the last, until I felt like I was drowning in them. I thought of my childhood, of the moments that had always felt slightly off, the questions my parents avoided, the silences that lingered too long, the way they sometimes looked at me with something that wasn't quite love, but something closer to guilt. I had always brushed it aside, but now I saw it for what it was. They hadn't been protecting me. They had been protecting themselves. The stranger's voice softened, but the bitterness remained. "You were never meant to know me," they said. "You were never meant to see my face, to hear my voice. They built your life on the condition that I stayed buried. But the truth has a way of clawing its way back, no matter how deep it's buried." Their eyes glistened, and for a moment, I saw the weight of their pain, the years of being forced to live in the shadows of my existence. The silence between us grew unbearable, filled with the weight of revelations that could never be undone. My heart pounded in my chest, my thoughts spinning, my body trembling under the weight of a truth I could barely comprehend. I wasn't just living my life. I was living theirs. Finally, the stranger leaned closer, their voice dropping to a whisper that chilled me to the bone. Their eyes locked onto mine, filled with sorrow and certainty, as they spoke the words that shattered the last fragile piece of who I thought I was. "You were never meant to find me." The house was silent, but inside me there was nothing but noise, questions, doubts, and the unbearable weight of choice. The photograph lay on the table, the stranger's face staring back at me through my parents' arms, a ghost of the life that had been erased. The bundle of letters sat beside it, each word dripping with guilt and fear, proof of the deal that had shaped everything. My brother's trembling confession echoed in my mind, and the stranger's voice still lingered in the air. "You were never meant to find me." I sat there for hours, staring at the evidence, knowing that whatever I chose would change everything. If I exposed the truth, the world would see my family for what it was, a legacy built on betrayal, lies, and the sacrifice of a child. The name we carried, the story we told, would crumble into dust. But if I buried it, if I erased the stranger again, I would be no different than my parents. I would be complicit in the silence that had destroyed us all. The weight of the decision pressed down on me until I could barely breathe. I thought of the stranger's eyes filled with years of pain, of watching their life stolen and lived by someone else. I thought of my parents' tears, their desperate words, their insistence that they had no choice. And I thought of myself, caught between two lives, one lived and one erased, both incomplete. I picked up the photograph, my hands trembling. My parents looked so happy in that moment, their smiles wide, their arms wrapped around the child who wasn't me. For the first time, I saw the truth in their faces. Not just love, but fear. They had built everything on a choice they could never undo, and they had spent the rest of their lives trying to bury it. But the cracks had always been there, waiting for me to find them. The letters felt heavier in my hands than paper should. My mother's words of guilt, my father's desperate justifications, they weren't just confessions. They were chains, binding me to a story I hadn't chosen but could never escape. I could burn them, destroy them, pretend none of this had ever happened. But even if I did, the truth would still live inside me, gnawing at me, demanding to be heard. I thought of the stranger, of the years they had spent in the shadows, waiting for the day they could return. They had been erased once, and now I held the power to erase them again. But could I live with that? Could I carry the weight of silence the way my parents had, knowing it would eat away at me until there was nothing left? The choice was mine now, to expose the truth and destroy what was left of my family's legacy, or to bury it forever and protect the lie. Either way, there would be no peace, only consequences, only cracks that could never be mended. I placed the photograph and the letters back into the envelope, holding it tightly against my chest. The decision wasn't made, not yet. But I knew one thing. The story wasn't finished. The truth was alive, pulsing in the shadows, waiting for the moment it would finally break free. And when it did, I would have to face it, no matter the cost. The house felt colder as I stood, the silence pressing in around me. My parents' voices, the stranger's warnings, my brother's trembling confession, they all blended together into a single truth I could no longer ignore. My life wasn't just mine. It was theirs too. And now, it was my burden to carry. The final thought settled in my mind, sharp and unshakable, as I clutched the envelope in my hands. The cracks in my identity told a story, and now it's mine to finish.